are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed who thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, they shall be called the children of God. Blessed those revile for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven.
The voice of God calls us to awaken him. How will he find us when he comes?
Awake and ready.
And when he asks us to dedicate our lives more perfectly to him, how will he find us?
Awake and ready.
Let's pray together. Heavenly Father,
Heavenly Father,
Divine Mother,
Divine Mother,
friend, beloved God,
friend, beloved God,
great Master,
great Master,
Jesus Christ,
Jesus Christ,
Babaji Krishna,
Babaji Krishna,
Lahiri Mahashaya,
Nayaswami Mahashaya,
Swami Shri Yukteswar,
Swami Shri Yukteswar,
beloved Master,
beloved Master,
Paramhansa Yogananda,
Paramhansa Yogananda,
saints of all religions,
saints of all religions,
we humbly invoke thy presence.
we humbly invoke thy presence.
Bless us
Bless us
with ever deeper receptivity
with ever deeper
to your
receptivity
divine grace.
to your divine grace.
Help us to use our willpower,
Help us to use our willpower,
our reason, our feeling,
our reason, our feeling,
in ever deeper accordance
in ever deeper accordance
with your divine will.
to your divine will.
We are your children.
We are your children.
Give us thyself,
Give us thyself,
that we may share your blessings with all.
that we may share your blessings with all.
Oh, peace. Amen. Please have a seat.
There's joy in the heavens, a smile on the mountains, and melody sings everywhere. The flowers are laughing to welcome the morning. Your soul is as free as the air. The flowers are laughing to welcome the morning. Your soul is as free as the air. And roaming the sunshine, dance through a meadow, or sit by a stream and just be. The lilt of the water will gather your worries and carry them down to the sea. The lilt of the water will gather your worries and carry them down to the sea. Men hunger for freedom but don't see their dungeon is only the thought that they're bound. Desires other shackles, a hope that tomorrow the doorway to joy will be found. Desires other shackles, a hope that tomorrow the doorway to joy will be found. There's joy all around us, why wait till tomorrow? We've only this moment to live. freedom no riches can give. There's joy in the heavens, a smile on the mountains, and melody sings everywhere. The flowers are laughing to welcome the morning. Your soul is as free as the air. The flowers are laughing to welcome the morning. Your soul is as free as the air. The flowers are laughing to welcome the morning. Your soul is as free as the air.
Continue to meditate as we listen to these words from affirmations for self-healing. This week's quality, power. Power is an aspect of God. Human beings often associate the word power with ruthless ambition and dominance over others. But it is a misdirection of power to exert it over others for selfish ends, and a misuse of it to exert it without care for their well-being. Rightly understood, power is the ability to command our own energies, above all, for our own transcendence, but also for the good of others. Such power is important for spiritual growth. Many people imagine that spiritual development is manifested as a sort of saccharine sweetness. The saints, however, are people of enormous inner power, before which others often tremble. Yet theirs is a power only for good. Its roots lie buried in the soil of pure love. Let's affirm together, as Yogananda taught, first out loud in a strong voice, and then a little softer, and then a whisper, and then silently. Mine is the power of the universe.
Mine is the power of the universe.
Channeled for my own awakening.
Channeled for my own awakening.
And the awakening of other sleeping souls.
And the awakening of other sleeping souls.
Mine is the power of the universe.
Mine is the power of the universe.
Channeled for my own awakening.
Channeled for my own awakening.
And the awakening of other sleeping souls.
And the awakening of other sleeping souls.
Now in a whisper, mine is the power of the universe. Channeled for my own awakening. And the awakening of other sleeping souls. Now silently broadcasting from the point between the eyebrows. Mine is the power of the universe. Channeled for my own awakening. And the awakening of other sleeping souls. And pray silently with me. Help me to feel that thy power runs through my veins, courses through my thoughts, and sets my noble feelings afire with love for thee. Oh, peace. So I want to welcome you all again. And also, we're so happy to have Nayaswami Naidhruva with us. Some of you were here yesterday, some weren't. She gave a workshop on change your magnetism, change your life. And she's going to share a little bit more with us after we share the reading for this week. And it's, Yogananda talked about magnetism, that our spine and our whole being is magnetic, and that the heart is one end of our magnet, and the point between the eyebrows is the other. And that this whole science of Kriya Yoga, of communing with God, of loving God, is that science of literally magnetizing our own spine, heart, and brain so that we can have contact with God in deep silence and in deep meditation. So it's been a great joy to have you with us, Naidhruva. And after our service today, we're going to take her down to the South Bay. She's going to do another workshop a shorter workshop this afternoon at the South Bay at our center on Ananda Beach on a different subject. So this week's reading, yeah, you can sit down. This is from Rays of the One Light. These are weekly commentaries in the Bible and the Gita, Bhagavad Gita. This week is ego, friend or foe. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. Jesus Christ begins his Beatitudes with the words, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." To be poor in spirit, in such a way as to merit the kingdom of heaven, doesn't mean to be poor-spirited. Rather, it means to seek oneself as owning nothing, since all belongs to God. For all is a manifestation of his consciousness. St. John of the Cross wrote, "If you would own everything, seek to own nothing." That which the ego relinquishes, offering it up to soul consciousness, is reclaimed forever in cosmic consciousness. Nothing is ever lost. Paramahansa Yogananda tells the story in Autobiography of a Yogi of the levitating saint, Bahaduri Mahashaya. "Master," said a disciple of the saint once ardently, "you are wonderful. You have renounced riches and comforts to seek God and teach us wisdom." It was well known that Bahaduri Mahashaya had forsaken great family wealth in his early childhood when single-mindedly he entered the yogic path. "You are reversing the case." The saint's face held mild rebuke. "I have left a few paltry rupees, a few petty pleasures, for a cosmic empire of endless bliss. How then have I denied myself anything? I know the joy of sharing the treasure. Is that a sacrifice? The short-sighted worldly folk are verily the real renunciates. They relinquish an unparalleled divine possession for a poor handful of earthly toys." The Bhagavad Gita in the 3rd chapter states, "All things are everywhere by nature wrought in interaction of the qualities. The fool, cheated by self, thinks, 'This I did, and that I wrought.' But, ah, thou strong-armed prince, a better lessoned mind, knowing the play of visible things within the world of sense, and how the qualities must qualify, standeth aloof even from his acts. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind."
I first encountered that book during a seclusion I was taking at Swami Kriyananda's apartment at Ananda Village. And if you've ever been there, either on tour, his apartment is available. All his books are still there. And I was looking through his bookshelf, just out of idle curiosity mainly, and I saw this book, I Was a Monk. I pulled it out and I read it, and it was I was deeply, deeply, deeply touched by this book. And since, my response, the thing that caught my attention initially was, in the foreword to the book, it describes him as living in, John Tenimer is, in his later years, living in a rustic redwood house in the hills near Los Angeles. And he had people visiting him periodically. And among his visitors was Amelita Galagurchi and her husband Homer Sandals. Now, she is a soprano, as you may know, who was a direct disciple of Yogananda. And so was her husband. I said, well, why are these direct disciples of Yogananda visiting this man, living in such humble circumstances, in the hills near Los Angeles? So that made me decide to read the book, just looking at it. And then he also mentioned other well-known people, not on this path, who would visit him. I thought, interesting, humble redwood house, rustic environment. So I picked up the book, and I must say it was a wonderful journey. And I made it a point of sharing it here and there with people. And when I first heard of the book, I'll tell you right now, I ordered a number of extra copies online, and there were plenty of copies. The supply has dwindled. The word is out, not just for me, but there still are copies available. The original printing is still available, I think. But John Tetimer lived for 25 years as a monk in one of Roman Catholicism's most austere orders, the Passionist order. I'd never heard of the Passionists, but it's based in Missouri. And he became a monk at age 18. And at age 18, he entered into the training that monks go through. And from the very beginning, he distinguished himself. He was brilliant, he was humble, and he was devotional. And after 2 years, he was one of 2 of the monks in that particular group of monks in training who were selected to go to Rome to complete the 2-year course before they would be ordained as priests. So he completed that. That was his first excursion to Rome, and I have to assume he must have been noticed because he went back after 2 years and to Normandy, Missouri, where he was teaching. He was an excellent teacher. Everybody loved him. But suddenly a summons came from Rome. We're not told at what point after he was ordained a priest this happens. They're asking him to come back and start an international college. So, he's followed obedience. He leaves Missouri, he goes there, spends a number of years in Rome. He establishes a very effective international college for, I think it was available to all the monastic orders, not just the Passionists. So he's there. Then he goes back after a period in Rome. He goes back to Normandy, and he's helping to establish a lot of new directions there. Then he's called back to Rome. Now he's in his 30s, about 36. And they have appointed him to the post of Consultator General. Consultator General is just a rank below cardinals. And people were already talking about him as becoming a cardinal. Now, brilliance, devotion, humility, I mean, you couldn't ask for a more ideal combination. And total surrender to the will of God as expressed through his superiors. Well, what happened to John Tetimer is what happens to all very humble, very serviceful, very willing devotees. There was a piling on of more and more responsibilities. In being consultator general, it's a huge responsibility. You're consultator general to the Pope. You're one of 6 in all the world who are advising the Pope. And that's a fairly demanding job. But just to give you an idea of the kind of responsibilities that were added on, he was asked to become father confessor to a whole congregation of nuns. So, and that's, how often do you confess? Well, once a month? However often they confess, he had to be there as the confessor. But those were the most kind of dramatic examples of the piling on of responsibilities. But the thing that was the most difficult for him, and I'm going to get to this right now, is that he was very inward in his nature, and there was a practice among those in this monastic order of what they call mental prayer. Now, mental prayer is really the meditation. They call it, St. Teresa of Avila practiced mental prayer. So did St. John of the Cross. And from the very beginning, Tetimer was good at mental prayer. He went deep. In his early years as a monk, he said he had the feeling often that God was near, that he was walking with God as he went about all of his daily activities. Now, with the piling on of responsibilities, something has to go. And what do you think had to go? His time for mental prayer. His time for mental prayer was cut short. He had a vow of obedience. As I understand, you don't go and say, I don't want to do this. You do it. No questions asked. I mean, it's a very different kind of path. Here you have a chance. But there it wasn't even heard of. So the piling on of responsibilities, more and more, that is, he talks about in the book, is a sign of what happened to him. He said he was on the road doing something. He was staying in a little pensione, I guess, a small hotel, whatever. And out of his window, he could see the figure of a woman in the next building, an attractive woman. He said he looked out the window, he saw this woman, and he said, and he looked a second time. He said he would never have done that in his earlier years as a monk. Let's take that second look. Now that doesn't seem like much to us, but it was a lot to him. He realized how much his devotion, how much his sense of, mainly his devotion had been undermined, because it's devotion that keeps you safe from these things. Well, fortunately for John Tedimer, his health broke down under the pressure of all this work. And he was sent to Switzerland to recuperate. And his book is mainly about what happens from that point on in his life when he was recuperating. He talks about himself as spending most of his time in a little balcony room out on the balcony, ensconced in a sheepskin lined sleeping bag. And there his mind was free, finally, he said, to do what he'd been wanting to do for so long, which is to practice mental prayer. And so I wanted he writes about the first experience. And one of the things I love about this book is that it validates everything that Yogananda ever said about cosmic consciousness. But you don't know in the introduction of the book that he's going to have experiences of cosmic consciousness. That's not why I read the book. But that was the great blessing of reading this book, that this man, while he was recovering from overwork in Switzerland, had a beautiful experience of cosmic consciousness, which he describes. And he says, this was the effect of they call it contemplation in that tradition. This was the effect of my contemplation upon me. A new faculty of knowing was born in me, and the quiet stillness yet intense activity of consciousness within me. I seemed to touch the heart of reality, the very essence of existence, with a directness and immediacy rendering all my former knowledge false and illusory. He says, as it were, I seem to sense another dimension, or perhaps I should express it better to say all dimensions seem to go, leaving me conscious of a presence, a reality having no form, yet not abstract and lifeless as were the ideas of the mind, but concrete, vital, palpitating with realness. He says, let me emphasize, I do not allow myself to jump to the conclusion that my experience per se was a realization of the presence of God. But whether in truth it represented a direct union of the soul with God, or the merging of the soul in the consciousness of one's higher nature, it seemed to me the same thing, an overleaf that was in the right direction. I had the definite impression of the loss of my own personality and that of a larger consciousness, which we may call God, or on the way to God. Well, there's more discussions of his experience in the book, but that was one that I found especially inspiring. But what happened as a result of these experiences? He's still, a high official in the Catholic Church in his monastic order. They sent him there to recover. What's happening? Well, he said, the initial result of my contemplation was the loss of all faith in the power of the human mind to know truth. Now here he is in one of the most mental of the monastic orders. And now he's lost all faith in the power of the human mind to know truth. He says, I came to he says, far from being depressed or disillusioned by such a discovery at this juncture of my life, I felt an uplifting joy. I was coming to a great new unknown world, out of the small world pictured by my mind, with all its unresolved difficulties, contrivances, and contradictions. I felt thrilled by thoughts of the vastness of the real world as distinct and other from my old thought world. So, he lost faith in the power of the human mind to know truth. Now, where is I going to leave him in this monastery that's dedicated to the search for truth through the mind? Well, we'll soon find out. He said, The second loss of faith, one was the loss of faith in the power of the human mind to know truth. The loss of faith in Orthodox religion of any form. He says the second. Now, we are not Orthodox religion. I hope you understand that. Ananda is not Orthodox. You know this, of course. He says the second and more formidable state of my contemplative experience was loss of my faith in Orthodox religion of whatever forms. He said, it was this human part of my faith that I lost on my mountaintop. The human part of this faith, he said, but I there entered into a knowledge of God and Jesus that were far greater and more beautiful than could ever be put into the words of doctrines and creeds. And he says, the evil and the sacrilege comes from confusing this, the interpretation that the world places on the experience of a great soul like Christ or Krishna. They somehow conflate that into the creed itself. So the creed disappears. And he says, you are required to follow the creed on penalty of excommunication because it is seen as one with the original revelation. Does that make sense? And he says, of all the churches that are guilty of this, the most guilty is the Catholic Church. And he, so the lost faith in the power of the mind to know truth, and that's something that we certainly subscribe to on this path. The loss of faith, now this doesn't really apply to us, but human mind to know truth about the ultimate. He emphasized that, truth about the ultimate. The mind just can't know it. We can't verify that cosmic consciousness is a reality using the mind alone. We have Master's beautiful poem, an experience of samadhi, but until we experience it, it's not real to us. We get glimpses here and there, and those glimpses keep us going, on the path to the more fuller experience, our oneness with that divine reality. But he says, it was the human, did I read this? Yeah, it was the human part of faith that I lost on my mountaintop. I there entered into a knowledge that Jesus and God and man were far other and far greater and more beautiful than man could ever put into words of creeds. He says, this unholy wedlock of divine inspiration and human knowledge and the organizing of it into a body of doctrine and orthodoxy that is proffered as sacred are the greatest crime against God and his gentle Son imaginable. And they have led to numerous crimes in their names. He said, I now feel this is the most unfortunate aspect of all religion, and especially of Catholic Christianity. So the realization of this was the loss of his faith in the creeds of the church. Now, as he was going through this, now these creeds his training went deeper than this may suggest, because he was taking walks, he was recovering from his illness, he recovered enough that he could take long walks in the Swiss, where he wasn't in a city, it was a rural area, so he was taking long walks. And one of the days when he was there was an avalanche. And he came upon an avalanche that had occurred, and people had been killed. There were rescue workers digging out bodies, and it was apparently quite a scene, and people being carried away in stretchers. Many people died, many were saved. But he said he realized at that point he was shaken, because one of the worst fears of a real devout Catholic is to die without absolution from sentence. And he realized these people, if any of them were Catholics, they didn't have a chance to be absolved of their sins. That's what priests are called for the last rites. And he said he realized he wasn't as far away from his belief in those teachings as he thought. He said, all I can do now is walk the path that I've been given and see where it takes me. So he continued to walk that path. He continued to practice mental prayer, and he went deeper and deeper into that divine experience. And he realized that there was no turning back. That's the end of it. That's the end of the book. But he said, because he was so immersed in the Catholic creed, he spent a lot of time in his book discussing the nature of creeds and the elements that go to make them up. And he says, there are two elements that make up faith in a creed. And he said, I could not take from anyone his faith in his creed. Rather, I would urge him to distinguish well between the two elements that make it up. He says, one of these is the mind, which is of little or no real or permanent value. I should tell that to my lawyer friends. He said, this is the element that will make you hate your brother and destroy him because he will not believe as you will. Is that interesting? He says, the other aspect of a creed is the divine element. And he says, that is born of our higher being beyond the mind. It is a direct perception. He says, the divine element of a creed is like a faith is akin to love and just about as unexplainable. It is the substance of religion, the eternal living part of it. All else is accidental, subject to error, to change, to loss. He says the divine element of one's faith is no more founded on reason than our life and love and beauty founded on reason. He says the tragedy is that in our lives is that true faith is always confused with faith in a creed, and that both are indiscriminately called religion. Now, this is one of the clearest articulations of that point I've ever come across, because he lived it, and he was immersed in that belief upon his faith, but he had the brilliance and the understanding and now the attunement to be able to explain it. He says, here's his key point, his concluding point, so to speak. He says, God and heaven are here right now to be lived and enjoyed. They're here right now. And heaven is here right now to be lived and enjoyed. Did we but occasionally still our senses and our ideas, which, as the philosopher will tell you, are born of sense, and allow the warmth of that reality to fill our souls. This is the true religion, and the illumination you bring back, he says, is the only true faith. And we only have to recall certain words to know that it will not fit into the human language. And what are those words? Be still and know that I am God. We only have to recall those words, be still and know that I am God, that we can know that will not fit into human language. He says, this is a faith that has moved mountains, that have worked wonders in the past and have inspired people to do noble and wonderful and selfless deeds. Then he goes on to talk about the mind. He says the real culprit is the mind. Interesting. The real culprit, he says, in human nature is the mind in its undeveloped state. In my opinion, is the cause of all separation, schism, competition, and selfishness. For it relies on the testimony of the senses and conceives of reality as broken up into a lot of little units, and fails to perceive the unity underneath it all. So what does he do? Well, he stays up there for a little longer, and the next thing we know, they're sending people up to see him. He's been up there 18 months. Aren't you better? Are you getting better? Have you recovered? You coming back anytime soon? And so the first man who comes, he says, is a very deep soul, and he gave him wisdom. He was able to help him because he's not sure what he's going to do at this point. You know, he's having all these exalted experiences. He's got this work that's summoning him to come back. So it was Brother Leo he came up to see him. And he said he had wisdom to give me. He doesn't say what he told him, but he said, I can only continue in the direction that I'm walking. I can't stop right now. So, but now it's almost getting on to 2 years, and he's clearly recovered. So they send up 3 other monks, good friends of his from his time serving there in Rome, and they said, come on, what's happening? Aren't you ready to come back? And he said he had to say that he was upset with the dilemma he was in, because it meant he had to go out into the world with no experience. He had to leave the world he had known since he was 18 years old, but he said he had no choice. That choice was forced upon him. And though here he is, a middle-aged child, as he describes himself, going out into a world he has never known. And they, he said, these were men who loved each other. We loved each other, but we knew we could no longer walk the same path hand in hand. So, on that note, he ends. He said, he told them this. He said that the mental world in which they lived had become unreal to him, and that he had lost all faith in the world of Aristotle and abstract thought. Well, this was too much. Okay, I mean, they couldn't understand it. So he was encouraged to write to Rome and asked to be released from his vows. And he was released from his vows. And he says, I am thankful for each moment of the years in that blessed cloister, where my soul drank deeply of yearning, of brotherly love, and of communion with God and contemplation. I am equally thankful for the years that have followed outside the garden and walls of the monastery, yet still in God's great cloister. His beautiful world, where the abiding peace of the former has accompanied me in my joy of the unslackened search for truth, of beautiful human love, and of the continuous consciousness of God. Well, he went on, as I say, to magnetize a small group of people around him. He wasn't here to do a big work. He did small work. And he was there to give spiritual nurturance to those people who discovered him and were in tune with the message he had to share. And it's very important for us to understand, we all think we need an important outward role, to find cosmic consciousness or to be liberated. We don't. We just need to attune to the world that God has given us and to live it to the best of our ability. He did that. He did that as a monk. He did that after he left the monastery. And there are two introductions to his book. And I say to know John Tedderer was to love him. He was just a fine human being. And that he touched everyone he met. So, all of you too will at some point begin to touch those who you meet. And I think I told one class, one of my mother's first comment was, you become a lot nicer. So she knew something was happening, by being on the spiritual path. Come a lot nicer. Well, that's pretty good, Mom. I hope so. Now, she wasn't in favor of my, throwing away what she considered was my professional life. I'm an attorney, and going on the path. But what I gained was irreplaceable. Anyway, and I came from a world that exalted the mind, and then, as I say, lawyers. But, so maybe that's why I resonate so deeply with his story, because of his attachment to that and his transcendence of that, and his ability to lead a very simple, humble life. And one person who I shared this story with said something to me, I'm glad to hear he didn't have a great work to do. That I find that very encouraging. I said, because, we all think, well, there's Swami and there are the different people. I said, he did the work that God gave him to do. It was his own little great work. And many people climbed that hill to his little redwood house, and they would eat sliced apples and salted nuts around the fire. And they described it as when John got going, he was very tall, very lean, he married and had 3 children. And survival wasn't easy for him. He had to support his family, but he managed to do it. But he became the center of a little nucleus. And I really appreciated that person's perception that we all think we've got to go out and do a great work. We don't. We do the work that we're given. And there are souls we are meant to magnetize and inspire. So don't think, and at some point you'll know when it's time for you to start doing more of that kind of thing, if it is your destiny. But anyway, as I said, I love sharing about him. And I'll read one of his close friends. This friend thought he was really good. He said, have you returned to your normal acceptance of the church's teachings? He said no. He said, my only answer to Leo at that time was to resume my duties would require that I be dishonest, and I can't be dishonest. And so, but what's touching about this story is how much they loved him, and how sensitively he handled it, and how he waited until he was absolutely sure. And anyway, I share this also because it's a beautiful account of cosmic consciousness by someone who is not well known, not a world figure like Yogananda. And I encourage you to read it, because he goes into great detail about it. I've only given you a few excerpts. And that experience awaits all of us. You know, and as I say, this one woman, when I gave this talk before, she said, I was so glad to hear that he didn't start a big work. I said, no, he didn't. And we won't, I don't think any of us here will either. But he did the work he was given to do. And many, many famous people, they're listed in the introduction, went to see him. They'd heard about him. And enjoyed his magnetism. You know, they would talk. He said when John would start talking, he would start stuttering. He would going so fast. But he said he had this great plume of white hair by the time he was nearing the end. And one of his friends visited him in the hospital just before he died. And he said he was close to the end. And he said, how are you feeling? He said, he used to have a twinkle in his eye. He says, Frank, maybe now I'll get some answers.